and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. A little note for viewers, for those of you watching us through the good offices of Free Speech TV. They will be in a pledge week next week, and our schedule will be slightly different. We'll be airing on Friday night and Saturday night. Check the Free Speech schedule for that, but it looks like Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday, 11 p.m.
Okay.
On with the show.
In the news this week, it looks as if no one wants to defend Illinois' law banning same-sex marriage.
Fascinating. And a couple of fascinating pastors. An out gay Catholic priest in Minnesota tells his parishioners they are allowed to vote against an amendment that would ban same-sex marriage.
Well, the Pope gets hold of him.
Yeah.
Speaking of Minnesota, the makers of Cheerios have come out against the Minnesota amendment to ban same-sex marriage in November.
Why did you pick Cheerios as the particular product?
Because it's cheery.
Okay. Well, and pastor in Dallas, a big-time Baptist minister, gave a speech that was a stirring defense of President Obama's support for same-sex marriage. We'll show you some of that.
Speaking of defense, the American Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, delivered his LGBT Pride Month message, which we will show you in its entirety.
You might think we'd show you President Obama's Pride speech, but we're not going to because that's pretty predictable. We'll tell you where to find it. But what we will show you from the Pride reception at the White House is a little impromptu marriage proposal.
Yes. In Queens, New York, a fifth grade student was stopped from reading his competition essay in support of what he called same-gender marriage. We're going to show you his speech in its entirety.
It's totally charming and amazing. In New York, LGBT and AIDS groups joined a mile-long march against racial profiling by the New York Police Department. And not just racial profiling. They go after transgender people, too,
Oh, absolutely.
And that
absolutely. That was part of it.
Yep.
There was an historic LGBT conference held in China.
And good news from France, where the latest parliamentary elections make it look like we're going to get some good pro-gay legislation in the next year or so there. We'll give you the details.
And we're going to, we're going to review the newly out Jim Parsons in the Broadway revival of Harvey, a rarely revived play about women war correspondents in World War II, Max Maven's latest magic show, and a revived Maltby Shire review.
And a depressing movie about rape in the United States military of men and women, gay and straight.
So, we start in Illinois.
We do. Illinois last year passed a civil unions law. Civil unions for same-sex couples are legal in Illinois, and probably for opposite-sex couples, too. So the right wing is trying to, I'm sorry, let me start again on that. There is a ban on same-sex marriage, however, in Illinois, and our side has just filed a number of lawsuits challenging that.
It's very similar to the California situation, because once you say you can have all the rights, like they did in Jersey and they did in California, then we say, well, why won't you say marriage? And it makes a relatively easy argument in court.
In fact, this is a new strategy from our legal groups. Pick the states where civil unions or extensive domestic partnerships are legal and go into those states and make the legal argument that this is now discrimination because you claim you've given us all these rights, but in fact it's unequal if you don't call it marriage.
So the people who are being sued have a very interesting response to this, and we're going to show it to you. There.
I know there's passions on this issue, but we're not talking about marriage in the sense of religion. We're talking about what government does. And government should not be in the business of discriminating against people. We all would agree today that the laws of a few decades ago outlawing marriage between blacks and whites, for example, it was wrong. We'd certainly agree that keeping blacks out of restaurants a few years ago was wrong. In the same way, I do think history will show this is the right direction. It's an unusual case. Fortunately, I'm not a lawyer, don't have to worry about it. But I do, in this case, hope that the lawsuit leads to what it should, and that is full, equal rights for those people seeking marriage regardless of their sex.
As the lawyer representing Clerk Orr, as you're aware, he was served with 2 lawsuits on this issue, and as David has already said, we filed today in our answer in which the office has, we are admitting the salient allegations in this complaint because we do believe that the Equal Protection Clause of the Illinois Constitution is just that, protects everyone equally. And the Illinois statutes that deny the issuance of marriage licenses against for same-sex couples violates the Illinois Constitution, violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Illinois Constitution. So that is what we filed today in our answer in response to the plaintiff's allegations.
Hear, hear. And, you know, I was talking to Ann Northrup about this case, and it seems like, you know, somebody else may try to step in and say, we'll defend the law, but they may not have standing to do so.
My guess is that some member of the legislature who passed this ban on same-sex marriage will try to defend it as a law passed by the legislature, or a right-wing legal group like the Alliance Defense Fund or one of those will try to come in and defend the law, because here you have the officials who are being sued refusing to defend the law. Which is quite exciting. The State Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, had already said she would not defend the law.
Right.
So there we are.
Right.
And next we move to Minnesota, where the right wing has placed on the ballot in November a constitutional amendment, a proposed one, that would ban same-sex marriage there.
Which they don't have there.
Same-sex marriage, yes. It's one of 4 states that are going to have these votes in November: Minnesota, Maine, Washington, and Maryland. This one is over a state constitutional amendment. So our side is against the same-sex marriage ban constitutional amendment, and there's a huge fight going on.
And out there in Minnesota, a lot of Catholics, and the Catholic Church has been one of the main forces behind this. So
behind passing the law.
Right, behind passing it. So
imagine our consternation when we came across the following speech by a Catholic priest to his congregation.
We weren't consternated. We were pleased, weren't we?
I was consternated. Here is, let's see, what's his name? Father Bob Pearson of Minnesota, speaking to his congregation about the proposed constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage in Minnesota.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church states in number 2358 that gays and lesbians, quote, must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided, end quote. I spent many years as an LGBT ally on our campus, starting a safe space training program. And while it was not without some controversy, I knew I was doing the right thing. In good conscience, I needed to speak out. It was in November 2005 that I was offended to learn the Vatican had released a document that said gay men cannot be priests because they are, quote, seriously obstructed from properly relating to men and women, end quote. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I knew that I was gay when I was ordained. Did that mean that my 21 years of ministry was a mistake? My faith suggested that I could not, in good conscience, continue to remain silent. and I cannot remain silent today. I spoke up then, and I'm speaking up now to say that I believe this amendment violates an important principle of Catholic teaching, and that as Catholics, we can vote no.
Well,
Let's have more of you Catholic priests speaking out.
everything's up to date in Minnesota, including on the corporate side, where General Mills, maker of Cheerios and many other cereals, has come out publicly opposing the constitutional amendment.
And the National Organization for Marriage is blasting them for declaring war on marriage. General Mills? Cheerios? Are you kidding? Well, all they said was, we don't believe it's this amendment, this is what the CEO of the company said, it's not in the interests of our employees or our state economy, speaking in those terms.
Which is an interesting point we've gotten to historically. It's also interesting that the National Organization for Marriage and their cohorts have now retreated to a position where they've sent a letter to corporations in Minnesota saying, please maintain a position of neutrality.
Right, 50. They wrote to 50 of them
Yeah.
to do that.
They're running scared.
Should we go to Maine?
No, we should go to Dallas.
Okay, all right, let's go to the minister in Dallas. This is Pastor Frederick Haynes III. You know, I mean, I suppose a lot of African-American pastors felt especially on the spot after the president became the first gay president and said he supports same-sex marriage.
Well, 30 seconds after he said it, he was on the phone to half a dozen of them around the country,
And
white and black.
If you listen to this guy at length, he talks about that, but it is a very stirring statement from a Baptist preacher, which is significant
Dallas.
here in Dallas on this subject, and let's listen to him.
Are the ostracized other. I got to hang out here homiletically because I'm sure some of y'all came here today wondering what I would have to say about what was said by the President of the United States this past week. Well, I want to juxtapose what Pharaoh decreed to what the President decreed. The President remembered that when on January the 20th, he lifted this nation by raising his hand of 2009 and took the oath of office. Don't forget that he was sworn to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, which was born out of a Declaration of Independence. Do you know the words of the Declaration of Independence? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people are created equal. I got to hang out there. Notice it does not say that all straight men are created equal. It does not say that all men, unless you are gay and lesbian, are created equal. He swore upon oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution, not the Bible, but the Constitution of the United States. He is not the pastor of the United States. He's the President of the United States. And for the first time in the history of this nation, we have a president who has dared to use his position to make the Democratic promise available, not just for a select few who are up and in, but for everybody, regardless of their race, their creed, their color, or their sexual orientation.
Somebody say amen.
You know, given how much we are trying to exempt religion from having to approve us, we're getting a lot of support in pulpits these days.
That's very nice.
It is very nice.
Very nice.
And President Obama, by the way, was campaigning in Baltimore last week and spoke out overtly in support of the Maryland law in legalizing same-sex marriage.
Right.
He has been freed by his evolution.
He has, as he will be now in Maine, to approve of that, because we wondered about that, because this is, in Maine, we're bringing a thing on the ballot which
Yes.
says, let's have marriage, and we wondered what the president might do on that, because it's not a divisive amendment brought by them, it's brought by us. But when we put it on the ballot, we wrote this long language about, you know, opening marriage to same-sex couples, but also religious freedom, so you don't have to do it if you don't want to do it.
That's the construct now.
And the Who's the officer in this case?
Secretary of State.
Who's a right-winger, who's the nominee for Senate, I believe.
By the Republicans.
For the U.S. Senate. He's anti-gay, he's anti-same-sex marriage, and he reduced it to a simple phrase for the ballot, which says, do you favor a law allowing marriage licenses for, do you want to allow same-sex couples to marry? That's it. Do you want to allow same-sex couples to marry? We're screaming foul because we said people agreed to put a lot more on the ballot.
Our side wants to include in the language on the ballot the fact that no religious officer would be required to perform marriages to which they do not agree, as they are not now. If, a Catholic priest doesn't want to marry a mixed religion couple or any other
Well, you've got 30
religious...
days to comment, and he's got another 10 days to craft the final wording. Could that go to court?
Absolutely, it could go to court. And we are in the comment period now. And the trick here is that he is running for the United States Senate, and so he is doing everything he can to screw us. Now, the fun thing is that neither he nor the Democratic candidate for Senate is going to win. The winner is going to be Angus King, the former governor of Maine, who is an independent, but who is more prone to agree with us than the other side. But things are evolving in Maine. And in Maryland, the right wing has turned in enough signatures. They've been approved. So there will be a question on the Maryland ballot about whether or not to go ahead with the marriage that has already been legalized by the legislature and the governor.
And Ann doesn't like polls, but the latest poll in Maine, 55% approval for same-sex marriage, although they haven't been hit with those ads. They're going to tell you what terrible things it's going to do to your children yet.
Even better polls in Maryland and Washington, I think. And we're doing okay in Minnesota, but these polls are not to be relied on any more than presidential polls in the face of the onslaught of right-wing advertising that will ensue.
Right.
So let's go to the back to Washington and the administration and the Pride celebrations. Probably the most surprising acknowledgement of Pride this year came at the Pentagon, where they held their first Pride celebration ever, as you can imagine, since we weren't legal at the Pentagon in the military until last year.
But Leon Panetta, who's the Secretary of Defense, is from California, had a pretty good record on gay rights, et cetera, so, it's to be expected.
Well, yes, except that it's the first time. So he recorded a Pride message, and we'll show you that.
Leon Panetta.
Secretary of Defense.
Yes, he is.
Celebrating
Pride Month. I want to personally thank all of our gay and lesbian service members, LGBT civilians and their families for their dedicated service to our country. Before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you faithfully served your country with professionalism and courage. And just like your fellow service members, you put your country before yourself. And now, after repeal, you can be proud of serving your country and be proud of who you are when in uniform. The pursuit of equality is fundamental to the American story. The successful repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell proved to the nation that just like the country we defend, we share different backgrounds, different values, and different beliefs. But together, we are the greatest military force in the world. It also reminds us that integrity and respect remain the cornerstones of our military culture. The Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force implemented the repeal with a focus on respect and individual dignity. As Secretary of Defense, I'm very proud of how we implemented repeal. Going forward, I remain committed to removing as many barriers as possible to make America's military a model of equal opportunity, to ensure all who are qualified can serve in America's military, and to give every man and woman in uniform the opportunity to rise to their highest potential. Diversity is one of our greatest strengths, and during Pride Month and every month, Let's celebrate our rich diversity and renew our enduring commitment to equality for all.
He gets asked during the debates how's this working out? It's been on for more than a year and a half now. And you have any evidence that there's any big problem? You're going to turn that around?
I'm sure he will say that he doesn't believe in social experimentation in the military, and we should go backwards.
Really?
But one thing that's interesting is that the Pentagon not only issued this Panetta statement, but they put up posters all over the Pentagon about LGBT Pride Month and diversity. And they're lavender posters, and they're really quite attractive. But if the Secretary is really interested in expanding opportunity for all, I wonder whether this is some signal that he's going to work on equal benefits for lesbian and gay service members, for their spouses.
There's a lawsuit about that.
There is, but the Obama administration has not indicated any, attitude on that. And also service by transgender people who are barred from the U.S. military. So those are issues that are still on the table. The actual Pride celebration at the Pentagon is next week on the 26th. Not too late to get there.
And so they had the Pride celebration at the White House with the president. We don't mean to be blasé about that. It is a big deal that he does
500 people there.
You're not going to have that in the Romney administration, the Romney-Rubio administration. But one of the things the president said was, I promise you, you won't just have a friend in the White House, you will have a fellow advocate for an America where no matter what you look like or where you come from or who you love, you can dream big dreams and dream as openly as you want.
Well, he gave the now standard list of accomplishments of the administration, which he, the kids could recite in their sleep. But it's a good, decent
Sasha
speech.
And Malia?
Yes, and if you want to see or read the president's Pride reception speech, you can go to whitehouse.gov for the transcript or the video of that. But there's a video you probably won't see there of an event that happened after he spoke. And you can start to run this as soon as you can get it up because we want to talk over it. Of the 500 guests there were a couple. Scout, who is a transgender man, who's a doctor who works in Boston at the Fenway Health Institute, longtime activist, one of the co-chairs of one of the marches on Washington. And Scout's partner, Liz Margulies,
who you see there holding the glass, and there's Scout on his knees.
And Scout is proposing to Liz.
Oh, thank God he's proposing, and it's not something else.
Well, you can see that Liz is not entirely comfortable about this because Liz is not in favor of marriage.
And I'm not in favor of public proposals. Don't you remember Working Girl, where Alec Baldwin asked Melanie Griffith to marry him? Whatever.
Well, Liz finally acceded and decided in a public setting that
that is the best course of action.
Yes, was to say yes.
To accede.
So
you can say no later.
There she is, saying yes.
But there it is.
Yeah. So this has become a big news story, especially because Scout is transgender. So the right wing is all up.
So it's a heterosexual marriage.
It's a heterosexual marriage. They've been together 3.5 years. But that was the real big event at the White House.
Other federal news: the Senate has finally confirmed our ambassador to El Salvador, who's been working there on a recess appointment, Mara Carmen Aponte. She was stopped because she's very pro-gay.
Yeah.
That was the thing that was holding her up. They say there were other reasons. But anyway, she's in now.
All right, a number of other political headlines I'll whip through. In Nevada, they held a primary last week, and a couple of LGBT candidates won. Lesbian Patricia Spearman, Democrat, defeated an incumbent state senator for that seat and will be the new state senator.
Well, there's a lot of redistricting going on. That's helping incumbents lose.
And out gay James Healy, also a Democrat, won a primary for an assembly seat in Nevada. So those are big wins there. We stated incorrectly last week that Jacob Candelaria was the first out gay member of the legislature in New Mexico, winning his primary. He is not the first, but he will be the current only out gay member of the New Mexico legislature. And maybe the biggest news is in Virginia, where we had told you that longtime activist and one of the first military members to come out, Tracy Thorne Beglin, had been rejected by the House of Delegates for a circuit court seat, general district court seat.
Yeah, he's a prosecutor down there. They voted against him because they said he couldn't be objective because he's a gay activist, basically. And so the Richmond Circuit Court approved his nomination on an interim basis. Basically, they're allowed to do this without going through the legislature, but that's not a permanent appointment.
He will hold the seat temporarily until 2013, when the General Assembly will vote on his appointment to the seat.
And in Pennsylvania, the Bethlehem Area School District has approved same-sex partner benefits. They just did it administratively, and they did it, and no problem.
But in Michigan, the House has passed a bill allowing school counselors and people studying to be counselors to refuse to serve clients, LGBT clients, for religious reasons, although they must refer them to other counselors. This is bad news.
This woman was being prevented from getting her degree if she wasn't going to get with the program. And it's not a matter of approving, disapproving. It's a matter of professional behavior, which she's not engaging in.
Yes, exactly. And in New York State, the legislature, both houses, has passed the Anti-Cyberbullying Act, which is a companion to the Dignity for All Students Act.
That's Danny O'Donnell's bill,
Yep.
who's been in here oftentimes, so that's good.
Yes.
And Washington got its anti-bullying law, is getting it signed on June 22nd.
But let's go to a couple of other students. First, in Queens, New York, where Cameron Slade, fifth grader, has become the object of a lot of controversy.
Well, here's the deal. This was a student essay contest. His mother has some lesbian friends, or a couple, so he wrote an essay on supporting same-gender marriage, as he calls it. Didn't even use the word sex.
Well, that was the point. He didn't want to use the word sex, so he referred to it as same-gender marriage.
Sure, which
Very
is fine.
clever.
Which is fine. He's a smart kid.
He is, and he's being
You're gonna see him.
conscious of the issues.
But the principal said, this is totally inappropriate, too controversial, you can't do this. It is an essay that is read in front of the entire grade school, first grade through sixth grade, I guess, first through fifth, whatever. Stopped. Then they asked the chancellor, step in. Danny Drum got involved in this openly gay city council member, and a fourth grade teacher who was out to his students. And he says, what are you doing? You're totally turning the Respect for All curriculum on its head. You've got to have this in there. And Dennis Walcott says, I agree with the principal. And so This
is too sensitive for these young minds.
What a signal to send on this. As Danny said, a message of hate. You're telling every teacher and every student, don't talk about gay in the schools. This is in the city of New York, folks. I realize it's grade school, but they're not talking about sex. They're talking about marriage, which is the law of the state.
One of my favorite moments in the work we used to do for Hetrick Martin, going into the schools and talking about being lesbian and gay. We'd go in there, hi, I'm your local lesbian, ask me anything. A fourth grade class in Manhattan, a little girl, they start asking about marriage. And at that point, the only place anything was legal was Denmark with their civil partnerships. This is 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
How old are you?
Too old. So the kids start saying, well, can you get married? Because this was long before this current discussion.
And you said that's inappropriate. I can't answer that.
I said,
no.
Well, in Denmark you can have these relationships, but nowhere else. And this little fourth grade girl gets up and she puts her hands on her hips and she says, well, I think that's stupid. I think you should be able to marry anyone you want, even an elephant.
Out of the mouths of babes. But what I want to emphasize, you're going to watch the news report about how this was worked out, and then we're going to show you the kid's speech.
Right.
But people need to understand, Mike Bloomberg, your hero, controls the New York City schools. He has not spoken out about this. He has not put a stop to the censorship of this issue, and it's heartbreaking.
It is.
on all scores.
Yeah. But here's
So-
the news report.
We begin with the growing debate over a grade school speech contest.
A Queens fifth grader was prevented from talking on the topic of his choice, same-sex marriage. CBS 2's Tony Aiello has this speech controversy.
The original message was that no matter what orientation you are, you should be treated the same way as a straight person.
Fifth grader Cameron Slade, mature beyond his 11 years, wanted to talk about same-sex marriage during a speech contest at PS 195, or as he calls it,
same gender marriage. He decided to say gender because he's not comfortable with saying the word sex.
His mom is camera shy, but proud of her son for supporting marriage equality, and disappointed the principal decided the topic was not appropriate for a first grade through fifth grade assembly. Instead, Cameron spoke about animal cruelty during Friday's contest.
I thought my original speech was really gonna win. I was very confident in it.
The principal here, Beryl Bailey, decided Cameron will be allowed to deliver his same-sex marriage speech on Monday at a special assembly just for the fifth graders.
I'm really pleased with that compromise. I'm really glad that that the DOE has took the time to pay attention.
But the decision incensed City Council member Dan Drum, who said in a statement, Cameron Slade's principal has taught a lesson in hate. Chancellor Walcott defended the principal.
It's something that the principal felt that she needed to do more due diligence with her parent community because of the topic of the speech itself.
Cameron hopes parents talk with their kids about same-sex marriage. In his words, it's out there.
They can sneak stuff, they can search it on a computer, they can watch it on the news.
He says he's anxious to give his speech on Monday. In Rosedale, Queens, Tony Aiello, CBS 2 News.
Chancellor Walcott, same-sex marriage is legal in New York State.
Right, it's the law. And, it's disgraceful that he's been censored in this way, and we have to turn this situation around for the entire school system.
There are so many kids in these schools who are children of same-sex parents and who are stigmatized and made to feel bad about themselves when a speech like this is censored.
And people need to understand that in order to do this fifth grade speech, just to the fifth grade, a letter had to go home to parents warning them about it. I mean, that you cannot treat this subject that way. I mean, all right. But we should let you hear his speech and judge for yourself if we've got that ready.
The lovely Cameron Slade, smarter than all these adults, giving his speech.
President Barack Obama recently talked about same-gender marriage with his wife and 2 daughters. Some people are for same-gender marriage, while others are against it. Like President Obama, I believe that all people should have the right to marry whoever they want. Marriage is about love, support, and commitment. So who are we to judge? If we judge people like this is a form of prejudice. We must learn to accept and respect all differences. Last year, I had the opportunity to hang out with my mom's 2 friends, Aura and Kiana. These 2 women are in a relationship together. They have a beautiful daughter named Kayla. Some people may disagree with their relationship. After spending the day with them at White Post Farms and having dinner at Chili's, my mother explained their relationship to me. This family seemed like any other family. They seem happy, and best of all, they seem to love each other. The only difference was that there were 2 moms instead of a mother and a father. Since this was a new experience for me, I was curious to learn more. My mom is very open to me about same-gender marriage. However, some adults may feel uncomfortable and think it's inappropriate to talk about this to children. I think adults must realize that as children get older, they become aware of these mature issues that are going on in the world. If children read or watch the news, they can learn about things like same-gender marriage. So what's the point in trying to hide it? In conclusion, I hope that everyone understands how important it is to respect everyone for who they are. Same-gender marriage is becoming more popular. I believe that same-gender marriage should be accepted worldwide and that parents and teachers should start to discuss these issues without shame to their children.
We got to get you a meeting with the mayor, and we got to get
Cameron will be sitting in as a guest host on Gay USA any minute now.
Hey, you folks in Maine and all the states where you're having referenda, get this young person on your ads talking to the people of your state. Some sense into them.
Yeah.
All right.
So much smarter.
Then
I want to go back to teaching in the schools. The kids are so much more interesting. Except in Bergen Beach, Brooklyn.
Well, we've just been made aware of this outrage, where a student named Cardin Ulysses, Ulyssse, I'm sorry, I don't know the proper, at Roy H. Mann Junior High School in Bergen Beach, was
14 years old,
brutally beaten, left blinded in one eye. He's already had 2 eye surgeries. And he was called a effing faggot, I don't know what that word is. Maybe it's a pussy, a transvestite, and gay. These were the things that happened to him. And he's suing the school system for $16 million. There's a picture of him with his parents. So the school system's, going to have to probably lay out maybe millions of dollars in this case, and they're not willing to change the culture in the schools because they're too effing afraid to talk about gay issues. That's the problem.
There is a cause and effect here. It'd be nice if they understood that.
Right.
Meanwhile, as long as we're in schools, we have to tell you this really ugly, I think, story from San Diego. 7th grade boys in an English class in San Diego got it into their heads that they were going to give each other what they called a gay test.
Was there an adult in the room?
It's unclear. The teacher
I had trouble with
is
this
sort
story.
of involved, but not.
All right, go on.
But I think it was the kids' idea. They came to class in gym shorts. They all looked at gay porn videos on their cell phones, and whoever got aroused, this is a boys' school, was labeled gay.
What was the
point?
point?
And they were masturbating in class.
What was the point of this?
A gay test.
Maybe cell phones should be banned in schools.
Oh my God. 9 kids have been suspended. The teacher is still teaching at the moment, but I think they're going after him too.
Well, speaking of masturbating, Larry Craig, you thought you'd heard the last of him.
I did. What happened?
Well, the federal election regulators saying he misused $217,000 in campaign funds for his legal defense in 2007.
Oh, Larry.
Then, we've told you about this business of churches trying to get being in the schools, the public schools of New York.
Yes.
Well, I will give Christine Quinn credit, the Speaker of the City Council, because she blocked even voting on a resolution on this in the council, although we were waiting for a court decision this month in a new round in that case.
Well, but how do you feel about this Muslim auxiliary cop who is suing the NYPD because they won't hire him because of his anti-gay attitudes, because he said at one point that homosexuals should be locked up. He says he's changed his mind and that he still thinks it's a sin, but he no longer thinks we should be locked up, and therefore he should be allowed to be
if we fire everybody from a religion that teaches that we're evil and blah, 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 and some of them say we should be killed, of course, like Christianity, that's in your Bible, what do we do?
I think we have to operate on people's actions rather than their beliefs.
I agree with that. And speaking of which, let's talk about the stop and frisk march first, because this was.
As long as we're on the cops.
I mean, they had this massive silent march to protest profiling of people during stops and frisks in general. There are 700,000 stops and frisks a year. They are mostly on the basis of you're black or you're brown and you were walking through the neighborhood.
And you're male and you're young.
That's it. And it's an outrage, and it's got to stop. And that was the main thing about it. It is used against transgender folks and gay people to some extent as well. And one of the things that the press picked up on was that there was a large gay presence, a lot of gay endorsements, including ours, for this march. Now, I will say I covered it. You can't cover the whole thing. It was a mile long. A lot of groups just brought a banner and a couple of people to carry a banner. I wouldn't say we mobilized the whole community around this.
No.
But it was still heartening, a lot of coalition building,
Yep.
and people feeling that, we're all together in this. But my favorite story of the week, speaking of racial profiling, was Noack Deer.
Yes.
Noack Deer was the lead opponent of the gay rights bill in New York, a horrible anti-gay bigot. I don't even know if he's changed on that, but he's a judge now. And he is now not going to prosecute people arrested under the container law, where you're, because you're having a beer outside, because he says you don't know that was 5% or whatever, 4.5, whatever the hell percentage is. He says you don't know that from sniffing it. You don't know that. And everybody you bring into my courtroom is African American and Latino.
Yeah.
And this is BS.
Yeah.
And I'm not convicting them anymore. So Noack Deer, I never thought I'd say it. I love you.
Well, on this issue.
Well, who else is standing up on it?
I agree. I was shocked to read that. And how do we feel about the NYPD issuing new patrol guidelines their treatment of transgender people? What they really do is they stop all transgender people out in the street and accuse them of being prostitutes and run them in.
Absolutely.
No matter what. And now there are these new guidelines that say no harassment, no discrimination, accept people's self-identification without doing a body search.
Well, they're very well-written guidelines, and
Yeah.
the question is whether they'll be implemented.
Exactly.
There are 4 bills in the city council to limit the way they do stop and frisk, and we have to get that passed. That's in the hands of Speaker Christine Quinn, who runs the city council. So let's see where she comes out on that issue.
There's a lot of lip service that doesn't pan out in real life in this
Okay.
town. And one follow-up on a story from last week, we told you that there was hundreds of thousands of people signing petitions to the Boy Scouts of America saying you should change your policy, and there was some indication that they might adopt a local option rule. Well, some of these petitions have been directed to board members of the Boy Scouts who are executives of big corporations who have great LGBT policies, non-discrimination policies. So people are saying to them, hey, you have this in your workplace. Why wouldn't you enforce this with the Boy Scouts? So the Ernst & Young CEO, who is a board member of the Boy Scouts, says the membership policy is not one I would personally endorse. I intend to continue to work from within the Boy Scouts of America board to actively encourage dialogue and sustainable progress.
That's a dodge.
I think that's a pretty weak
That's a
statement.
dodge.
Yeah. All right. International news?
Sure.
Okay. Well, the thing that struck me the most was this LGBT Community Leader Conference in Beijing, China.
First one.
Unbelievable.
Historic.
80 people from 53 organizations shot from the back so they would not be shot from the front.
Photographed. Careful what you say in China.
I said that on
They're very
purpose.
fond of the death penalty.
It was loose, but that was a
Yes.
deliberate irony on my part.
Okay.
It was a conference on cooperation and development of Chinese LGBT organizations for 2 days in Beijing. Well, I think the point is that it was not broken up by the government. It seemed, I couldn't quite figure out whether it was actually sponsored by a department of the government, but it seems to have happened without interference.
Well, I'm glad it is, since they're taking over the world.
And
We're going to be working for them in no time.
And alternatively, in Uganda, for the second time, cops there raided an LGBT rights workshop, harassed the attendees, detained them all, questioned them individually. And a government official said this happened because homosexuality is illegal in Uganda.
Yeah.
Really?
And in, I guess this is Northern Ireland, the whip of the Ulster Unionist Party made remarks that gays are deviant and that gay sex was a rung on the ladder to bestiality. And so they got rid of him as whip. He said he was withdrawing. He's disappointed that he's being removed from just basically quoting the Bible. Isn't this a Christian country?
In Uruguay, a court has recognized a gay couple married in Spain. The legislature will consider a full marriage rights bill by the end of this year. They do have civil unions in Uruguay, and they may move to full rights for same-sex marriage by the end of this year. And in France, we're very
Right.
happy because we told you when the socialist president was elected that there was going to be a subsequent election for members of parliament, and where the legislation would go on things like marriage would depend on who was elected to the parliament.
Now it's going to be like California.
well, don't forget Prop 8. But the socialists had a big win in parliamentary seats, so here's what they're looking at as possible legislation within the next year. Same-sex marriage, adoption rights, second parent adoption rights, no compulsory surgery for transgender people to change their sexual identity, and easier ID for them. Blood donation ban for gay men may be lifted.
Yep, they'd already announced that.
And lesbians may get access to fertility
Don't
treatments.
tell me it doesn't matter what party you vote for.
Yeah.
When you control the government, then you get to do things. I mean, we're going on to AIDS news?
Yes.
Because we are thwarted again in New York with a Republican majority in our state Senate.
Yep.
Yes, 4 of them allowed the marriage bill to go through. We got that. But Tom Duane, who is now leaving the Senate at the end of the year, desperately tried to get his bill, which would put a 30% cap on rent for poor people with HIV. And, they did allow it to the floor. And the Republicans, most of whom voted for it when it had no chance, when the governor was going to veto it, wouldn't vote for it this time. Why? Mike Bloomberg gave them a call and said, don't pass this thing.
Because we don't want to subsidize people's rent, that we don't have to.
Right.
We already subsidize rent in this way for lots of other groups, but not for people with HIV who are poor, heaven forbid. Right. But there were also a lot of Democrats absent, so hard to tell what that was about. I want to mourn the death of Barton Benish, who died of AIDS complications, was just fantastic artist. I met him once. He was a sweet guy, very involved with AIDS issues as an artist. He made a lot of art out of HIV-infected blood, out of the cremated ashes of people who died of AIDS. He was very provocative, very brilliant, and a wonderful guy. And he died at age 69 3 weeks ago. The Times finally got around to doing an obit. Barton Benish, Benes. Look up his art. It's really quite wonderful.
And then the Times also got around to reporting on all the heart trouble that long-term survivors of HIV are having.
Yeah.
A lot of heart attacks turning up. And what they're saying is this: don't wait till you have your first heart attack. This is something that if you have HIV, you've got to get your doctor to track your heart condition, all that kind of stuff, because they think it's because of inflammation, basically.
And because some of these drugs increase cholesterol levels.
In the liver,
Yeah, so be careful.
And of course, a lot of groups are asking us to look at the new face of AIDS as older people. This is a new communique put out by a lot of the groups, GMHC and SAGE and all these others. But of course, the other thing that we read this week was people saying, hey, of course, it's also African American and Latino, and are we all forgetting that, and non-gay specific in a lot of cases, are we, the white gays, forgetting about them now that,
of
that's
course.
well,
that's been true for years.
Yes, I know.
Not a headline.
But, well, there's a resurgence in activism that is going to be centered around the International AIDS Conference.
Well, bad headlines around the International
And Jennifer
AIDS
Flynn
Conference.
wants to come on this show and talk about it.
Okay. The U.S. excludes sex workers from visiting this country. Therefore, guess who's not coming to the International AIDS Conference?
Well, they're having their own, and it's going to be in Calcutta, India. It's going to be the Sex Worker Freedom Festival from just 21st to the 26th of July.
Drug users, too, also excluded. So,
What a country.
You thought it was great that they lifted the HIV travel ban, but it turns out the U.S. really likes to keep people out of all sorts, and this is going to affect the International AIDS Conference.
And one of the things Jennifer Flynn, who works with HIV PJA, what is the Prevention Justice Alliance, is this whole Robin Hood tax. This,
Yes.
This this tax on stock transactions,
Yep.
which would also have a nice effect on the economy
Yep.
because it would slow down stock transactions and make people think before they...
Some of the speculation.
Exactly. It's a
Yep.
speculation tax. So there's a real big push for this. They did some activities around it this week.
Yep.
They're putting Robin Hood hats on statues all over New York.
Well, it was the theme of the ACT UP 25th anniversary demo, too, and some great people working on that. So, and it seems to have some interest around the world. And bad news, you thought the Greek economy was a mess. Well, it turns out that the Greek police are also arresting sex workers, testing them for HIV, and posting the results with names and photos on their police website, and may prosecute them for intentionally causing bodily harm. This is also a practice in Malawi, but the sex workers there are suing.
Okay.
We'll see whether they get anywhere.
Entertainment news.
Entertainment news. I saw a very disturbing documentary this week that is opening in theaters in New York, LA, Washington, and San Francisco this weekend. The Invisible War, which is about rape in the U.S. military. Tens of thousands of people, men and women, are raped by their fellow soldiers in the U.S. military.
And to what do they attribute us not knowing more about this and this hitting the papers more and things?
It does hit the papers, but the military itself does not want to respond because...
Are you told to shut up about it if you get raped?
You're blamed. And you are diagnosed with personality disorder and discharged without benefits if you are the person raped.
How many court-martials of the rapists?
Virtually none, because often the rapists are the commanders, so you don't report it because like 80% of the rapes go unreported because the rapists are actually the people in charge.
It's like being in jail.
Yeah. It turns out that, we know that the military, desperate for members, has accepted a lot of criminals.
Yeah, people with criminal records. Yeah.
Twice as many sex offenders are accepted into the military as exist in the U.S. population.
Oh, man.
This is where sex offenders go to find victims.
Oh, my God.
And by numbers, more men are raped in the military than women.
Say that again.
Well, men are a much higher number in the military, so the percentage is lower. But in raw numbers, there are more men in the military raped every year than
And
women.
we certainly don't hear about that.
Well, this, you might think this documentary would be so horrible it would be unwatchable, but in fact it is completely compelling, and there is a lesbian victim in this who did not report her rape because she, was raped by people in charge. And it's something that really everyone should see and should rise up against. The Invisible War.
Well, I didn't see something that horrible. I saw Brendan Fay and Eileen Cutler's documentary about John McNeil. I'm in it briefly, but this is about the Catholic priest who wrote The Church and the Homosexual in 1976, I think it was. And really, he is identified by people like Gene Robinson and Bob Carter and all the pioneers. This is the most important Christian figure in the 20th century around LGBT issues.
And doesn't his book talk about same-sex ceremonies of union that were performed by the Catholic Church in hundreds of years ago?
Well, some of that is, of course, from Boswell's book, earlier, his history book. Okay. John was making a theological case, a moral theological case for homosexuality, and did a wonderful job. And it's a very moving film to watch. John is still alive at 86 and was up here in New York. But the film is going to be, I'm sorry I didn't give you this website, Bill, but go to takingachanceongod.com if you want to read about this film and where it is in your neighborhood. Okay. Some plays that I saw. I had to go cover a forum. I couldn't go see Max Maven. And Jed Justiniani, who went in my place, tells me I really missed it. And he says, if you're going to go see Max Maven at the Abington Theater, take somebody because nobody's going to believe what you saw. He said the guy looks like Vincent Price and sounds like Orson Welles, and he is absolutely amazing. So maybe I'll pay to see that. I saw a you've heard of Maltby and Shire, the collaborators. Well, they did a review called Closer Than Ever back in early 90s, and it sort of had gay content that I would say is ahead of its time for then, not now. It's kind of a smart review, but it's like one song after another about urban sexual relationships and all that kind of stuff. And it's a good show at the York Theater. And can we get the picture up there of Jim Parsons there on the right? In Harvey. This is, of course, you all remember it as the James Stewart film about the guy with the 6'3" rabbit. And that's Jessica Hecht, who was terrific as his sister. Look, it's a great plea for gentleness and kindness and all those kinds of things, with a lot of craziness and funniness and humor in it as well. So, I would recommend it. You want me to keep going?
Well, I've got a couple of things, but go ahead.
The last one I saw was at the Mint Theater, which now, you are never going to see this anywhere else. It only ran on Broadway for about 3 performances or something back in 1946 or something like that.
Before your time.
But you've all heard of Martha Gellhorn now because they made that Nicole Kidman film,
for HBO.
About her. She played
Hemingway.
And Hemingway. But
they were married, weren't they?
I don't know if they got married, but she wrote it with Virginia Cowles, another woman war correspondent who worked till she was 92. Covering the Iraq War. Anyway, back then they wrote a play about sort of a romantic comedy about women war correspondents in the war zone in Italy.
Oh, God.
And it's something of historical interest.
You'll go to anything.
They are not playwrights. Well, I go to the Mint because they revive things that you're never going to see anywhere else. And
not because you're a little minty.
I am. It's Pride Month, and I'm proud of it.
Well, in honor of Pride Month, perhaps, the Pittsburgh City Council proclaimed Sharon Needles Day, which is the drag name of the winner of RuPaul's Drag Race. And Sharon Needles is a very gothic drag queen, very anti-normal kind of traditional drag. And she won the RuPaul's Drag Race. And now the Pittsburgh City Council, where she's from, proclaimed it her day. She's also a big anti-bullying activist there.
Now we're talking about normal drag?
Yes, we are.
New standards of drag.
Traditional drag, like traditional marriage, traditional drag.
Well, I'm all for modifying whatever was traditional drag.
And a little sports news. A number of LGBT organizations, GLSEN, National Center for Lesbian Rights, Outsports, got together to hold a conference on LGBT issues in sports, and Nike hosted it, and that is considered a big deal, and they've got a whole agenda put together for how they're going to make sports, professional sports, amateur sports, more LGBT-friendly.
Tell them to give us a gay house in London.
Well, and they should work with the International Olympic Committee, which is going to announce some standards on women's hormonal content for competition, and it's going to be quite restrictive and not good.
Really?
They're going to disqualify a lot of women for having too much testosterone. Not good.
Oh, well, the saga continues.
Exactly. Next week, right here on Gay USA. See you then.
Take care.